So this is a little overdue, but 3 weekends ago, I participated in the GMTK 2020 Game Jam. The theme for this Game Jam was out of control. The first thing that came to my mind was pandemic or zombies, but I feel like something like that would be pretty obvious. Then I started thinking about natural disasters that could go wild, like floods or fires. I even thought about a game about scope creep, where your game gets bigger and bigger, and you get a game over when you miss a deadline. A bus that goes downhill out of control, kind of like that movie Speed. Enemies out of control, and you, the player, out of control. I ended up going with player being out of control. So the idea is that after shooting an enemy, your gun goes out of control and you can't stop shooting. Another thing out of control would be how many guns appear on the character model. First things first, let's go over the assets I used. I'm by no means an artist. I've dabbled here and there, but my main game dev skill is with programming. So I try to offset this by buying assets off the asset store. The first asset pack used was the Gang Warfare pack. It's a gigantic pack, but the only thing I used was the walls. Next is the All Sky pack, just so I don't need to use the default Unity skybox. And we have the low poly weapon pack. I wanted to be a ton of guns in the game, so I found a low poly pack that had quantity. You can even see it on the list here. I only ended up using 14 because I actually had no idea how I could fit like that many guns on a character model. Fun fact, this is the first ever asset pack I bought on the Unity asset store. That was like back in 2018. It's the Toon Soldier pack, which is actually pretty important. My main goal for this game jam was to learn about Unity Animator more. Like, I've always seen images of Blendtrees, but I never tried it out. I've never even touched it. It just kind of looked cool. This animation pack has multiple move animations for multiple weapon types, so it was perfect. Next we have my main side project, Bright Red Skies, where I got the character models from. Been working on this thing for over 2 years, which is actually pretty crazy. But I might end up doing devlogs for it. Okay, now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes. So the game jam started at 3 PM Eastern, but my work ended at 5 PM, and including the whole idea generation process, I was already a couple hours in. The first plan of attack was to handle the character controller, since it's probably the most important part of the game. Luckily, this meant I could finish my goal right away and learn about Blendtrees. So what a Blendtree does is it allows you to blend animations together using parameters. I have parameters for horizontal and vertical movement, which is -1 to +1 values based on the direction the player presses. You could set up animations for running forward, backward, left and right, and give it a corresponding horizontal and vertical value. So for example, up would be 0 horizontal and +1 vertical. Now when you press something like up and left at the same time, it'll perform the animation that's in between the animation for running up and the animation for running left. It makes things look a lot smoother, and I'm actually pretty happy with the results. Next, I wanted to add some reload animations, and things got pretty messed up. If you look at the animation while reloading, the character's feet don't move. This is because the reloading animation itself is stationary. This is where I learned about animation layers and avatar masks. So previously, whenever I would use the Unity animator, I'd always gloss over the fact that there's an entire tab for layers. Never used them before. What I came to learn is that you could create a new layer and specify an avatar mask so that all the animations in the new layer override the animations in the previous layer. In this animator controller, it checks for the weapon type used and then performs the corresponding reload, shoot, or draw animation. And here's what it looks like with the new layer and the avatar mask. You can now see the character reloading on the upper body part, but still running with the lower body part. I then started to work on getting the weapons implemented. Like I said before, I wanted there to be a ton of guns on the character model. So I dragged some guns onto the scene to see where they would go. When I ran out of space on the backpack, I began adding them to their chests, arms, and legs. I also added some UI for the health and current weapon info. In the final product, I managed to fit 14 guns on this model. Inside the actual weapon class itself, there were 15 editable variables: weapon name, time between shots, max ammo count, the ammo you get when you pick up the gun again, and damage. Whenever the ammo is updated, it lets the weapon UI know so it could also update. This is the timer that makes the gun repeatedly shoot. Using this time taken between shots variable, I get the percentage time until the next shot is taken and update the bar in the weapon UI. After completing the weapons, it was getting pretty late into the night, with only about 17 hours left in the jam. So the guns need to actually shoot something, meaning the next thing I worked on were the projectiles. The projectile is a simple sphere with a trail renderer. Each weapon type has its own projectile object size, as you can see here. Based on the weapon used to shoot the projectile, there's an associated bullet speed. In retrospect, this should really be in the weapon class, but this is a game jam, so stuff isn't perfect. I went to sleep after doing the projectiles and started working on the enemy spawners in the following morning, with about 7 hours left. The deadline was fast approaching and I still need to get the enemies to spawn into the map infinitely, so that's what I started to work on next. So the wave spawner had values like initial distance where the enemies spawn, distance between enemy waves, a max number of active waves in front of you per performance, and a distance threshold to start despawning waves too far behind you. I implemented a system where the game would spawn harder waves the farther you get, but due to time constraints, there's only one enemy wave configuration for each of the difficulties. Anyways, here's it in action. You can see that as you move ahead, more enemy waves spawn, and the waves behind you start disappearing. Okay, now I only have 5 hours left and I still need to do weapon drops. Over here we have the prefab for the weapon drops. Based on the weapon drop, it'll show the corresponding weapon object, and there's a glowing particle to make sure it stands out. When enemies die, they'll instantiate the weapon drops on their current position. Now, with about 2 hours left, I went on and completed the final touches on the UI. Added some really cheesy dialogue at the beginning to make it blatant what the game jam was about. There's also a start button to begin the game, and when you die, you're taken to a defeat screen showing your stats. And with only an hour left, I submitted my game to the game jam. The reception was great, people really loved it. But honestly, I do think this game was an improvement on my 2019 submission, and I'm actually pretty happy I managed to complete this thing within the 48 hours. I just want to say thanks for sticking through the entire video. I've been watching devlogs for a long time and it's really cool seeing all of the stuff that people can create. Been really eager to show off my own stuff, so here we are with this video. Side note, hearing my own voice is pretty horrifying. What I want to do now is spend maybe an hour a day continuing to work on Officer Gun. I'm trying to be realistic, and I know that this game most likely won't be turning any heads. But I think it would be fun to document the entire process, from game jam game to fully released game. I also eventually want to show the development of my main side project. It's an RPG, and I've been working on it for the past 2 years. If you're interested, make sure to subscribe to keep up with all the progress. Anyways, hope you guys have a great day.